The C-130 cargo plane's engine screamed as it descended through the thin mountain air. Sarah Martinez gripped the netting along the aircraft's interior wall, her knuckles white, her stomach somewhere near her throat. At 22 years old, she'd been a combat medic for exactly 4 months and 2 days. 4 months. The soldier beside her, a grizzled sergeant with a scar running down his left cheek, hadn't said a word the entire flight. None of them had spoken to her. The wheels hit the runway hard and Sarah's teeth rattled. Through the small window, she caught her first glimpse of forward operating base Tillman, a sprawl of tan buildings, concrete barriers, and dust. So much dust. It hung in the air like a permanent fog, coating everything in shades of brown and gray. "Welcome to paradise, newbies," the loadmaster shouted over the engine noise as the rear ramp lowered. A wave of heat slammed into Sarah's face, 120 degrees of dry, suffocating Afghan summer. She grabbed her medical pack and duffel bag, following the line of soldiers down the ramp into hell. The base was a maze of activity. Humvees rumbled past, kicking up clouds of dust. Helicopters thundered overhead. Soldiers in full combat gear moved with purpose while she stood there, lost and sweating through her uniform. A bead of perspiration rolled down her spine. "You Martinez," a voice barked behind her. Sarah spun around. A stocky man in his 30s stood there, hands on his hips, eyes squinting against the sun. His name tape read REYNOLDS. "Yes, sir. Private First Class Sarah Martinez reporting for." "Save it, I'm Captain Reynolds, Bravo Company. You're our new medic." His tone suggested this was not good news. "How long you been qualified?" "4 months, sir." Reynolds exhaled slowly through his nose. "Jesus Christ, they're sending us bobbies now." He turned without waiting for a response. "Follow me, try to keep up." Sarah hurried after him, her heavy bags banging against her legs. They weaved through rows of containerized housing units, CHUs, as Reynolds called them, past a dining facility that smelled of old grease and disinfectant, and finally to a small medical tent beside the base hospital. "This is your aid station," Reynolds said. "You'll handle sick call, minor injuries, and field calls when we roll out. Doc Williams is our senior medic, 3-tour, knows his shit. You shadow him, you learn from him, you don't embarrass us. Clear?" "Crystal, sir." "Good. Your CHU is number 47, row C. Settle in. Briefing at 1800 hours." He paused, his expression softening slightly. "Look, Martinez, I'm sure you did fine in training, but this ain't Texas. People die out here when medics fuck up. Don't be that medic." He walked away, leaving Sarah standing alone in the dust. That first night, lying on the thin mattress in her 8x8-foot CHU, Sarah stared at the plywood ceiling and questioned every decision that led her here. The air conditioner wheezed, barely cutting through the heat. Outside, she could hear soldiers laughing, the distant thump of music, the occasional roar of a jet overhead. She joined the army for one reason: money. Medical school cost a fortune her family didn't have. The recruiter had made it sound simple: serve 4 years, get the GI Bill, become a doctor. He'd shown her pictures of soldiers training stateside, mentioned Germany, Korea, peaceful deployments. Afghanistan had been a footnote, a possibility, not a certainty. But here she was, 7,000 miles from her mother's kitchen in San Antonio, in a war zone where she was expected to save lives with 4 months of training. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mom had finally pushed through the spotty Wi-Fi. "Mija, we're so proud of you. Stay safe. We love you." Sarah typed back, "Love you too, everything's fine here." She deleted fine and wrote good instead. Then deleted that too and just sent, "Love you too." The alarm blared at 3:17 a.m. on her 3rd night. "Medic AID station now." Sarah bolted upright, heart hammering. She grabbed her aid bag and sprinted toward the medical tent in her PT shorts and t-shirt, boots unlaced. A crowd of soldiers had gathered outside. "What happened?" she gasped, pushing through. "Martinez, finally. A soldier supported another man who was hopping on one leg. Peterson twisted his ankle during patrol. Sarah blinked. A twisted ankle. She'd woken up in a panic for a twisted ankle. "Bring him inside," she said, trying to sound professional despite her racing heart. As she examined Peterson's swollen ankle under the harsh fluorescent lights, she heard it snickering from outside the tent. Then someone's voice, not quite quiet enough. "They wake baby Doc up for a twisted ankle. This is fucking hilarious." More laughter. Sarah's face burned. She wrapped Peterson's ankle methodically, gave him ibuprofen, and sent him out on crutches. When she emerged from the tent, the soldiers were gone, but their laughter still echoed in her ears. She walked back to her CHU slowly, the night air finally cool against her skin. In the distance, she could see the mountains, dark silhouettes against a star-filled sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the wire, people wanted to kill her and everyone on this base. And her own unit thought she was a joke. The next morning at sick call, Sarah treated dehydration, blisters, a rash, and one soldier with what he swore was a spider bite but looked suspiciously like an ingrown hair. Nothing serious. Nothing that required real skill. She was restocking supplies when she saw him, a lean man in his late 30s, with tired eyes and a medical bag that looked like it had survived multiple wars. Doc Williams, the legend. He glanced at her once, nodded curtly, and walked past without a word. Sarah stood there holding bandages, feeling smaller than she ever had in her life. That afternoon, Captain Reynolds found her studying a field medicine manual in the aid station. "Martinez," he said, "we roll out at 600 tomorrow. Convoy escort, you're with us." Sarah's mouth went dry. "Yes, sir." "Get your shit together. Real mission, real bullets." He turned to leave, then looked back. "And Martinez, don't freeze. Freezing gets people killed." When he left, Sarah's hands were shaking so badly she couldn't turn the pages of her manual. She was going outside the wire, into a combat zone, where the enemy was real and the bullets weren't training rounds. The rookie that nobody trusted was about to face her first real test. And deep down, she wasn't sure she was ready. But ready or not, the war was waiting. Sarah hadn't slept. She'd tried lying in her bunk staring at the ceiling, running through emergency procedures in her mind. Sucking chest wound, seal 3 sides, arterial bleed, pressure, then tourniquet. Airway obstruction, head tilt, chin lift, check for obstructions. The steps played on repeat like a mantra, but they couldn't quiet the knot of fear twisting in her stomach. At 5:30 hours, she stood in the pre-dawn darkness, checking her aid bag for the 4th time. Tourniquets, check. Hemostatic gauze, check. Chest seals, check. Morphine auto-injectors, check. Everything was exactly where it had been 3 minutes ago. First time outside the wire, a voice behind her made her jump. She turned to see Private First Class Morrison, maybe 20 years old, with a baby face and an M4 rifle slung across his chest. He was grinning. "That obvious," Sarah tried to smile back. "You've checked that bag about 50 times. Yeah, it's obvious." He shifted his weight. "Don't worry though, this route's been quiet for weeks, probably just a boring drive." Sarah nodded, but Morrison's reassurance did nothing to slow her hammering heart. The convoy briefing was quick and clinical. 4 Humvees, 12 soldiers. Route Falcon through the village of Sanger. Expected duration, 3 hours. Threat level, moderate. Captain Reynolds pointed to a map, tracing their route with a laser pointer, but Sarah barely absorbed the details. Her mind was stuck on one phrase, threat level moderate. What did moderate even mean? The Humvee's interior smelled like diesel fuel, sweat, and gun oil. Sarah sat in the back, wedged between her medical bag and Specialist Chen, a quiet soldier who kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead. The gunner stood in the turret above them, swiveling his weapon back and forth, scanning for threats. The gates opened, and they rolled out into Afghanistan. The landscape was brutal and beautiful, jagged mountains in the distance, fields of poppy flowers swaying in the morning breeze, mud brick compounds with walls that could hide anything. Children waved from the roadside. An old man on a donkey barely glanced at them as they passed. Sarah's hand rested on her aid bag. Her mouth was dry despite the water bottle at her feet. "Relax, Doc," Chin said without looking at her. "You're gonna be fine." "How do you know?" Sarah's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Because we all were new once, and we're still here." The radio crackled with chatter from the lead vehicle. Morrison, sitting across from her, was humming something under his breath, some country song she didn't recognize. The normalcy of it was almost surreal. They were driving through a war zone and he was humming. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Sarah started to think Morrison was right. Maybe this would be boring. Maybe her first mission would be uneventful and she could. The world exploded. The blast wave hit like an invisible freight train. Sarah's body slammed against the Humvee's interior wall, her helmet cracking against metal. The noise was beyond sound, a physical force that seemed to come from inside her skull. Her ears screamed with a high-pitched ringing that drowned out everything else. Time fractured into disjointed snapshots. Smoke thick and black, pouring through the shattered windows. Someone screaming, who she couldn't tell. The Humvee tilted at a wrong angle. Sarah tried to move, but her body wouldn't respond. Her vision blurred, doubled, then slowly focused. Through the smoke, she saw Morrison. He was on the floor of the Humvee and his leg. Oh God, his leg. Blood, so much blood. His left leg below the knee was shredded, torn apart by shrapnel, the fabric of his uniform mixed with torn flesh and exposed bone. Morrison's eyes were wide, his mouth open in a silent scream that Sarah couldn't hear over the ringing in her ears. Move, she had to move. But she couldn't. Her body was frozen, every muscle locked in place. The training, the procedures, the countless hours of practice, all of it vanished, replaced by pure, paralyzing terror. Morrison's eyes found hers. His mouth formed words, "Help me." Still, Sarah couldn't move. Bullets began impacting the Humvee's exterior, sharp metallic pings that cut through the ringing in her ears. They were taking fire. The ambush wasn't over. "Martinez," Captain Reynolds' voice cut through the chaos, "move your ass." But she was back in training, back in that bright classroom in Texas where everything was clean and controlled and nobody was actually dying. This wasn't supposed to be real. Morrison's leg wasn't supposed to be. His hand reached out, bloody fingers grasping at air, at hope, at life. And something inside Sarah broke through the ice. Her hands moved before her mind caught up. She lunged forward, ripping open her aid bag. Tourniquet. Where was the tourniquet? There, she grabbed it, her fingers clumsy and shaking. "Morrison, stay with me." Her voice sounded distant, like someone else was talking. She wrapped the tourniquet around his thigh, above the wound, pulling it tight. Morrison screamed, a sound that would haunt her nightmares for years. But she kept pulling tighter until the arterial spray slowed, then stopped. "Good, that's good," she muttered, more to herself than to him. "You're okay, you're okay." Hemostatic gauze next. She packed the wound, her hands slick with Morrison's blood. The smell hit her, copper and meat and something else, something primal that made her stomach heave. She swallowed hard, forcing the bile back down. Bullets continued to crack overhead. Someone was returning fire, the gunner, still alive, still fighting. Sarah worked on autopilot now, her training finally kicking in. Pressure dressing. Check the tourniquet. Morphine. She jabbed the auto-injector into Morrison's thigh. His screaming quieted to whimpers. "Doc," he gasped. "Doc, am I gonna die?" Sarah looked at his pale face, his dilated pupils, the blood soaking into the Humvee's floor. Every instinct screamed that she had no idea, that she was just a rookie who'd frozen when it mattered, that she wasn't qualified to promise anything. But she met his eyes and said, "No, you're not dying today, I've got you." The firefight lasted 7 more minutes, though it felt like hours. When the Taliban fighters finally retreated and the dust settled, Sarah sat back against the Humvee's wall, her hands trembling uncontrollably. Morrison's blood covered her uniform, her face, her hands. Captain Reynolds appeared in the doorway, his face grim. He looked at Morrison, at the tourniquet, at Sarah. "Good work, Martinez. Medevac's inbound 3 minutes." Sarah nodded, unable to speak. As soon as Reynolds turned away, she stumbled out of the Humvee and vomited behind the rear wheel, her whole body shaking. Morrison survived. The helicopter came and took him away, and Sarah watched it disappear into the sky, wondering if he'd keep his leg, wondering if he'd blame her for freezing, wondering if she'd freeze again. That night, Captain Reynolds found her sitting outside her CHU, still in her bloody uniform, staring at nothing. He sat down beside her without asking. "I froze," Sarah whispered. "I saw him bleeding and I couldn't move." "But you did move, eventually." "Eventually might have been too late." Reynolds was quiet for a long moment. "Fear is normal, Martinez. Every medic feels it. Hell, I feel it every time we roll out. But you know what matters? You didn't let it win. When it counted, you saved that kid's life." Sarah looked at her hands. Morrison's blood was still caked under her fingernails. "Go shower, get some sleep," Reynolds said, standing. "We roll again in 3 days." As he walked away, Sarah realized something. She was terrified of the next mission, but she'd go anyway, because now she knew something she hadn't known before. She could push through the fear. She just hoped it would be enough. Sergeant James "Doc" Williams had the eyes of a man who'd seen too much death. Deep-set and gray, they seemed to look through people rather than at them. At 38, he was ancient by combat medic standards. 3 tours in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan, more saves than he could count, and enough losses to fill a cemetery. He didn't want a rookie shadowing him. "Your captain's orders, not mine," Doc said the morning Sarah was assigned to him. He didn't look up from the medical supplies he was inventorying. "Stay out of my way, keep your mouth shut, and maybe you'll learn something." Sarah stood in the aid station doorway, still exhausted from the Morrison incident 3 days prior. "Yes, Sergeant." "And Martinez," Doc finally looked at her, those gray eyes assessing. "I heard about the IED. You froze, then you saved him. That's normal. First time's always the hardest. But there won't be time to freeze on my watch. You freeze with me, someone dies. Understand?" "I understand." "Good, we roll in 20. Bring your A-game." The mission was a medical assessment at a village clinic 15 miles from base. Simple, routine. Except nothing was routine outside the wire. Doc moved through the convoy preparations like a machine, checking supplies, inspecting equipment, testing communications. Sarah mimicked his every action, learning through observation. He caught her watching and grunted. "You paying attention or just starring?" "Paying attention, Sergeant." "Then tell me, what's the most important thing in your aid bag?" Sarah thought of all her training, tourniquets. "Wrong, your brain," he tapped his temple. "All this gear means nothing if you can't think under pressure. Gear fails, training fails, but your mind, that's what keeps people alive." They mounted up. Sarah rode in Doc's Humvee this time, along with 3 infantry soldiers, Corporal Hayes, Private Chen, and Specialist Jackson. Hayes was built like a tank and barely fit in his seat. Chen was the quiet one from her first mission. Jackson never stopped talking. "So Doc," Jackson said as they rolled out, "how many saves you got, like total?" "Don't know, don't count." "Come on, man, gotta be over 100, right?" Doc's jaw tightened. "I count the ones I lost, that number matters more." The Humvee went silent. Sarah understood. Every medic carried their failures heavier than their successes. They were 5 miles out when the radio crackled. "Contact front, taking fire." The convoy lurched to a halt. Gunfire erupted ahead, the distinctive crack of AK-47s mixed with the deeper thump of American M4s. "Here we go," Doc said calmly, grabbing his aid bag. "Martinez with me. Stay low, move fast." Sarah's heart hammered as they exited the Humvee. Bullets snapped overhead, impossibly close. Doc moved in a crouch toward the lead vehicle and Sarah followed, her legs threatening to betray her. The lead gunner had taken a round through the shoulder. He was conscious, cursing, bleeding. Doc assessed the wound in seconds. "Through and through, you're lucky. Martinez, pack it." Sarah's hands shook as she tore open the gauze package. The gunner, a kid named Rodriguez, watched her with wide eyes. "You knew," he gasped. "Very," Sarah admitted, packing the wound entry and exit. "Well, don't fuck it up." "Wasn't planning on it." Doc supervised, correcting her hand placement, showing her how to feel for arterial damage. "Listen to the blood," he said. "Arterial bleeding sounds different, more pressure, rhythmic. Venous is steady. Know the difference, treat accordingly." The firefight continued around them, bullets, shouts, explosions. But in their small bubble of focused medical care, Doc's voice was steady, almost soothing. "Good, now pressure dressing. Tighter, tighter, there, see. You just saved this ugly bastard's life." Rodriguez managed a weak smile. "Thanks, Doc, both of you." Over the following weeks, Sarah went on 7 more missions with Doc Williams. Each one taught her something new. She learned to distinguish incoming from outgoing fire by sound alone. AK-47s crack sharp and high, Doc explained during one firefight. M4s pop deeper, heavier. M240 machine guns sound like ripping fabric. The enemy's RPGs whistle. Our mortars boom. Know the symphony, stay alive. She learned to triage without thinking. Critical, urgent, routine, Doc drilled into her. You can't save everyone. Save who you can in the order that maximizes lives. It's cold math, but it's how we win. She learned to work in impossible positions, treating a sucking chest wound while lying in mud, applying a tourniquet while pinned behind a wall, starting an IV while taking fire. Doc was relentless, demanding, and occasionally cruel in his honesty, but he was also the best teacher Sarah could have asked for. "You're getting better," he told her after the 3rd week. "You don't freeze anymore, that's progress." It was the closest thing to a compliment he'd given her. The breakthrough came during a night patrol. They were returning to base when the call came. "Man down, chest wound, not breathing." The convoy stopped. Sarah and Doc sprinted to the casualty, Private Miller, a 20-year-old from Ohio. He'd been standing in a turret when a sniper round caught him in the chest. He was blue, gasping, dying. Doc assessed him in the dark using only a red lens flashlight. Tension pneumothorax. His lungs collapsed, pressure building. He's got minutes. Sarah knew the procedure, needle decompression. Insert a large bore needle between the ribs to release the trapped air. She'd practiced on dummies dozens of times. But never on a real person, never in the dark, never while he was dying. "Martinez," Doc's voice cut through her rising panic. "You're doing this one. I'll guide you, but your hands, your call." "But I've never." "First time for everything. He dies if you don't try, get your kit." Sarah's hands found the needle catheter by muscle memory. She located the landmark on Miller's chest, second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, just like training. Except this was a real chest, real ribs, real life. "You sure about the placement?" Doc asked. Sarah palpated again, feeling for the space between ribs. "Yes." "Then do it, fast and confident. Hesitation kills." Sarah took a breath, positioned the needle and pushed. Resistance. Then a pop as the needle penetrated the pleural space. A hiss of escaping air, the trapped pressure releasing. Miller gasped, his blue lips turning pink, his chest rising and falling. "You did it," Doc said quietly. "Textbook decompression. That kid's alive because of you." Sarah sat back, her hands shaking with adrenaline. Miller was breathing. She'd saved him. For the first time since arriving in Afghanistan, Sarah felt something other than fear. She felt capable. Back at base, as they cleaned their equipment, Doc finally spoke the words Sarah had been waiting for. "You're a real medic now, Martinez. Not great yet, you've got a lot to learn, but you're real. You can trust your hands, trust your training. Most importantly, I trust you." From Doc Williams, it was the equivalent of a medal. "Thank you, Sergeant. Don't thank me, just keep getting better. Because this war isn't done with us yet, and we're gonna need every bit of skill we have." He didn't know how prophetic those words would be. 2 weeks later, Sarah would need every lesson he'd taught her. 2 weeks later, Doc Williams would be bleeding out, and Sarah would be the only medic standing. 2 weeks later, everything would change. But tonight, Sarah Martinez finally felt like she belonged. She was part of Bravo Company. She was a combat medic. She was ready. Or so she thought. October arrived with cooler temperatures and deceptive peace. The brutal summer heat gave way to pleasant mornings and crisp evenings. For 3 weeks, Bravo Company's missions had been routine escorts, patrols, medical assessments. No firefights, no casualties, the kind of quiet that made soldiers nervous. Sarah had fallen into a rhythm. Morning PT at 600, sick call at 800, equipment checks, training, missions every 3 or 4 days, letters home in the evenings. She'd stopped counting the days until her deployment ended. It made time move slower. "You're different," Doc Williams observed one morning as they restocked supplies. "You don't look scared anymore." Sarah considered this. "I'm still scared, I just don't show it." Even better, fear keeps you sharp. Overconfidence gets you killed. Doc had warmed to her over the past month. He still rode her hard during training, still corrected every mistake, but now he also shared stories. Stories of medics who'd done incredible things, and stories of medics who hadn't made it home. "Did you ever freeze?" Sarah asked him one evening. Doc was quiet for a long moment. "Second deployment. Iraqi kid, maybe 12 years old, caught in crossfire. I froze for about 5 seconds, felt like 5 hours. My partner had to shove me to snap me out of it." He paused. "The kid died. Still don't know if those 5 seconds made the difference, but I think about it." "I'm sorry." "Don't be, just remember freezing is human. Staying frozen is a choice." Sarah had made friends in Bravo Company. Real friends, not just people she worked with. Private Danny Chen was her closest. At 19, he was fresh-faced and perpetually optimistic, the kind of guy who found something to smile about even in a war zone. He kept a photo of his 3-month-old daughter, Isabella, tucked in his helmet band. "Look at this," Danny said one evening, showing Sarah his phone. His wife had sent a video of Isabella laughing. "She's never even met me. I left when she was 2 weeks old." "She'll meet you soon," Sarah said. 6 more months." 6 months, then I'm out. Gonna teach her to ride a bike, take her to Disneyland, be a real dad. His smile was wistful. "What about you? What's first thing you're doing when you get home?" "Sleep like 3 days straight." "That's it, no big plans." Sarah thought about it. "My mom's enchiladas, a long shower without flip-flops, driving my car with the windows down." She paused. "Normal stuff, I miss normal." "Yeah," Danny said softly, "me too." Corporal Hayes was the unit's big brother, literally and figuratively. At 6'4" and 240 pounds, he was a walking tank. But he was gentle with the younger soldiers, always checking on them, making sure they ate, slept, stayed hydrated. "You doing okay, Doc?" he asked Sarah one afternoon after a patrol. "Yeah, why?" "You look tired, you sleeping?" Honestly, no. Sarah's sleep was fractured, interrupted by nightmares of Morrison's shredded leg, Miller gasping for air, the sound of bullets cracking past her head. But she couldn't admit that. "I'm fine, Hayes." He studied her with knowing eyes. "Everyone gets nightmares here, ain't no shame in it. You need to talk, I'm around." "Thanks." I mean it, Doc. We take care of each other. That's how we survive. Captain Reynolds had begun treating Sarah like a real member of the team. He consulted her on medical logistics, asked her opinion on evacuation procedures, even cracked jokes during briefings. "Martinez, you've come a long way," he said one morning. "Remember when you showed up? I wasn't sure you'd last a week." "Honestly, sir, neither was I." "Well, you've proven yourself. The guys trust you. Hell, I trust you. That's not easy to earn." The praise warmed her more than she expected. She'd spent so long feeling like an outsider, like the rookie who didn't belong. Now she was part of the family. It felt good. It felt safe. It felt like everything was going to be okay. The intelligence briefings told a different story. Sarah sat in on the weekly tactical meetings now. On the third Wednesday of October, the intelligence officer, a serious lieutenant named Pham, pulled up a map of their area of operations. "We're seeing increased chatter in the northern sector," Pham said, highlighting a mountain pass. "Taliban are consolidating. We think they're planning something." "What kind of something?" Reynolds asked. "Unknown. Could be an attack on the base, could be IED emplacements, could be coordinated ambushes on convoys." Pham zoomed in on Route Falcon, the same road Sarah had traveled a dozen times. "This pass is a particular concern. Natural ambush point. We've been lucky so far, but luck runs out." "So what's the recommendation?" Doc Williams asked. "Increased vigilance. Vary routes when possible. Expect contact." Pham's expression was grim. "They're planning something, gentlemen. We just don't know what or when." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The quiet hadn't been peace. It had been preparation. That night Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Pham's briefing. The Taliban were planning something. Route Falcon was compromised. She got up and went to the aid station. Her medical bag sat on the supply shelf, always packed, always ready. She opened it and went through everything again. Tourniquets, gauze, chest seals, IVs, morphine, shears, gloves. Everything was there. Everything was ready. But was she ready? She thought about Morrison, about Miller, about all the training with Doc. She'd come so far. She'd saved lives. She'd proven herself. But she'd never faced a real fight. The IED ambush had been chaos, but it was over quickly. The other firefights had been brief, manageable. What if something bigger happened? What if the Taliban threw everything at them? Could she handle it? Sarah pulled out her notebook and wrote a letter to her mother. She did this sometimes, wrote letters she'd never send, saying things she couldn't say in her real letters home. "Mom, I'm scared. I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't know if I'm ready for what's coming, but I have to be because people are counting on me. If something happens, I want you to know I tried. I tried to be brave. I tried to save everyone I could. I love you. Tell Dad I love him too." She folded the letter and put it in the bottom of her footlocker, under her spare uniforms. The next morning, Captain Reynolds called the squad together. "We've got a convoy escort mission, day after tomorrow. Route Falcon through the mountain pass to resupply a checkpoint." He pointed to the map. "It's been quiet, but intel says stay sharp. Standard loadout, 2 medics. Doc and Martinez, you're up." Sarah's stomach tightened. Route Falcon, the compromised route, the natural ambush point. Danny Chen caught her eye and gave her a thumbs up. "Easy day, Doc. We've done this a dozen times." "Yeah," Sarah said, forcing a smile. "Easy day." But that night she had a dream. She was in a Humvee and everything was exploding. There was blood everywhere, screaming chaos. She was trying to save people, but there were too many. Her hands couldn't move fast enough. Doc was shouting instructions, but she couldn't hear him over the gunfire. And then Doc went silent. Sarah woke up drenched in sweat, her heart racing. It was 400 hours, 2 hours until she had to get up for PT. She didn't go back to sleep. The morning of the mission dawned clear and cold. Sarah ate breakfast but couldn't taste it. She checked her aid bag 3 times, 4 times. Doc caught her on the 5th check. "You're ready, Martinez." "How do you know?" "Because I trained you and because you've got good instincts." He paused. "Trust yourself. That's the last lesson I can teach you." At 9:30 hours, the convoy rolled out. 4 Humvees, 12 soldiers. Sarah was in the 3rd vehicle with Doc, Danny, Chen, Hayes, and Jackson, the same crew as always. Danny was showing everyone new pictures of Isabella. Hayes was eating beef jerky. Jackson was telling a story about his girlfriend back home. Everything felt normal. Everything felt routine. The mountain pass was 15 miles away. Sarah looked out the window at the beautiful, terrible Afghan landscape and felt it in her bones, the cold certainty that something was coming. Something bad was waiting in those mountains. She just didn't know it would change everything. She didn't know that in 3 hours, she'd be the only medic standing. She didn't know that the rookie nobody trusted would become a legend. But the mountains knew. The mountains were waiting. The mountain pass was beautiful in the morning light. Steep cliffs rose on both sides, their rocky faces painted gold by the sun. A narrow dirt road snaked between them, barely wide enough for 2 vehicles. Wildflowers grew in impossible places, purple and yellow blooms clinging to cracks in the stone. Sarah had traveled this route 6 times before. Nothing had ever happened. "Pretty, ain't it?" Danny Chen said, looking out at the landscape. "Hard to believe people are trying to kill us in a place this pretty." Hayes grunted. "That's Afghanistan for you, beautiful and deadly." The convoy moved at a steady pace. Lead vehicle, then the second, then Sarah's Humvee, then the rear. Standard formation. The radio crackled with routine chatter, distance markers, status checks, mundane updates. Doc Williams sat across from Sarah, his eyes half closed. He looked relaxed, almost bored. But Sarah had learned to read him over the past months. His hand rested near his aid bag. His breathing was controlled, measured. He wasn't relaxed. He was ready. "You feel it too?" Sarah asked quietly. Doc opened his eyes. "Every time we come through here, natural kill zone, if I was Taliban, this is where I'd hit us." "Comforting." "Wasn't meant to be comforting, just honest." He checked his watch. "We're halfway through, another 10 minutes and we're clear." 10 minutes? Sarah could handle 10 minutes. The road curved around a large boulder, narrowing even further. The lead Humvee disappeared around the bend. Jackson was in the middle of a story about his high school football days. "So there I was, 4th quarter, we're down by 3, and coach puts me in as quarterback even though I'd never." The world exploded. The blast wasn't just sound. It was pressure, force, violence made physical. The Humvee in front of them, the lead vehicle, erupted in a ball of flame and black smoke. Metal shrieked. The shockwave hit Sarah's vehicle like a giant fist, rocking it sideways. For one frozen second, there was silence. Then hell opened up. RPGs screamed from both cliffs. The second vehicle took a direct hit, its rear end lifting off the ground before crashing back down, engulfed in flames. Machine gun fire ripped down from the ridgelines. Dozens of muzzle flashes, maybe more, positioned perfectly above them. They'd driven straight into a kill box. "Contact, contact," the radio exploded with shouting. "Ambush, multiple RPGs. We're taking heavy fire." Bullets slammed into their Humvee with metallic pings and cracks. The windows spiderwebbed. The gunner in the turret above them, Specialist Morrison, who Sarah had saved months ago, returned fire, his machine gun roaring. "Out, everybody out," Captain Reynolds' voice cut through the chaos. "Take cover." The doors flew open. Hayes dragged Sarah out by her vest, shoving her toward a small depression in the ground beside the road. Bullets kicked up dirt around them. She dove behind a rock barely large enough to hide behind, her aid bag clutched to her chest. The ambush was perfect, coordinated, devastating. The lead Humvee was destroyed, blocking the road forward. The second Humvee was burning. They couldn't go forward. The rear vehicle was trying to back up but took an RPG to the engine block. It shuddered to a stop, smoke pouring from under the hood. They were trapped, pinned down, surrounded. And then the screaming started. Medic, medic. Sarah's training kicked in. She raised her head, trying to locate the casualty. Bullets snapped past, so close she felt the displacement of air. Medic, Johnson's hit, Johnson's down. The call came from the lead vehicle, or what was left of it. Through the smoke, Sarah could see someone dragging a body away from the burning wreckage. I'm going, Sarah shouted to Doc. She looked for him and her heart stopped. Doc Williams was on the ground 10 feet away, his face twisted in pain, his hand clamped over his left thigh. Blood poured between his fingers, dark, arterial blood that pumped in rhythm with his heartbeat. Doc, Sarah started to crawl toward him. No, Doc's voice cut through the gunfire. Johnson first, I can wait, G.O. But you're... That's an order, Martinez, G.O. Sarah hesitated for one agonizing second. Doc was hit. Doc was bleeding out. Doc was her mentor, her teacher, the best medic in the company. But he was right. She could hear Johnson screaming, multiple casualties. She had to prioritize. She had to choose. Sarah ran. The 30 meters to the lead vehicle felt like 30 miles. Bullets stitched the ground around her feet. An RPG hit the cliff face above, showering her with rock fragments. She dove, rolled, came up running, using every bit of cover she could find. Hayes appeared beside her, providing covering fire. I got you, Doc, move. She reached the lead vehicle. Johnson was on the ground, dragged clear by Corporal Patterson. His right arm was gone below the elbow, not wounded, not injured, but gone. The stump pumped blood with each heartbeat, painting the dirt red. Sarah's mind went blank for a microsecond. This was worse than anything she'd seen, worse than Morrison's leg, worse than Miller's collapsed lung. Then Doc's voice echoed in her memory. Your brain is your most important tool. Think, prioritize, act. Tourniquet now. Sarah dropped beside Johnson, ripping a tourniquet from her bag. His eyes were rolling back, his face ghost white. He was going into shock, seconds from losing consciousness. Stay with me, Johnson, stay with me. She wrapped the tourniquet high on his upper arm above the traumatic amputation, pulled it tight, tighter. Johnson screamed, a raw animal sound. Good. Screaming meant conscious. Conscious meant alive. The bleeding slowed, stopped. Patterson, Sarah shouted, keep pressure here, don't let go. Got it, Doc. More screaming. Medic, we got another one. Sarah looked back toward her Humvee. Danny Chen was waving frantically, pointing at someone on the ground. How many were hit? A bullet cracked past her head, close enough to feel the heat. The Taliban weren't letting up. If anything, the fire was intensifying. She could see muzzle flashes all along both ridgelines, 30, 40, maybe more fighters. They had the high ground. They had numbers. They had Bravo Company pinned in a perfect kill zone. Sarah sprinted back, keeping low. Her lungs burned. Her legs felt like lead. Time had become elastic, seconds stretching into hours, hours compressing into heartbeats. She reached Danny and saw who was down. Hayes, big, gentle Hayes, who'd checked on her, who'd been the unit's protector. He had a sucking chest wound. A bullet had punched through his armor's side plate. Air bubbled through blood with each labored breath. Shit, 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 Sarah muttered, grabbing a chest seal from her bag. Tension pneumothorax, just like Miller, except she was under fire and her hands were already slick with Johnson's blood, and Hayes was too big to move easily and... Focus. She tore open the chest seal, positioned it, pressed it down over the wound. 3 sides sealed, one side open to let air escape but not enter. Hayes gasped, his breathing easing slightly. You're okay, Hayes, I got you. Doc, Hayes wheezed, bad. You'll live. I didn't come all this way to lose you now. Medic, another call, this time from the rear vehicle. How many were down? Sarah looked around wildly. The battlefield was chaos. Smoke, fire, blood, screaming. Captain Reynolds was coordinating fire from behind cover. Jackson was working his radio, calling for air support. The gunners were returning fire, but they were outnumbered and outpositioned. And then Sarah saw him again, Doc Williams. He'd managed to apply a tourniquet to his own leg, but he was pale, too pale. He'd lost a lot of blood. He needed treatment. He needed her. But there were more casualties, more screaming, more dying. Sarah Martinez was a medic for barely 8 months. She'd frozen during her first real emergency. She'd been called Baby Doc and laughed at and doubted. And now she was the only medic standing in a kill zone with multiple critical casualties, surrounded by enemy forces that wanted them all dead. She looked at her blood-covered hands, at her aid bag already half empty, at the soldiers depending on her. 12 soldiers, 40 or more Taliban, 1 rookie medic. Doc Williams caught her eye from across the battlefield, their gazes locked. And he nodded, one simple gesture that said everything. You've got this. You're ready, now prove it. Sarah took one breath, then another. The Taliban fire intensified. Someone was screaming her name. Time was running out for multiple casualties. The next 32 minutes would determine if any of them lived or died. And it all depended on her. The rookie medic. The one nobody had trusted. All right, Sarah whispered to herself, let's go to work. She grabbed her aid bag and ran toward the screaming. Into the fire. Into history, time stopped being linear. It became snapshots, frozen moments burned into Sarah's brain with crystalline clarity. Minute 13, the dance begins. Sarah sprinted to the rear Humvee where Private Danny Chen knelt beside Specialist Rodriguez. Shrapnel had torn through Rodriguez's abdomen. A jagged piece of metal protruded from his stomach, blood pooling beneath him. Don't remove the shrapnel. Never remove impaled objects. It's plugging the wound. Danny, I need you to hold this pressure bandage here. Press hard, don't stop. Sarah's voice was steady, clinical. Inside, her heart hammered like a drum. Doc, is he gonna? He's gonna be fine if you do exactly what I say. Press, here, now. Danny's hands replaced hers. Sarah was already moving, her eyes scanning the battlefield. Doc Williams was still down, still bleeding, but he'd applied his own tourniquet. He could wait. The others couldn't. An RPG impacted 20 feet away. The shockwave knocked Sarah sideways. Her ears rang. She tasted copper and dust. Keep moving, keep working. Minute 47, the impossible choice. Martinez, over here. Captain Reynolds was dragging someone, Corporal Patterson, away from the burning lead vehicle. Patterson's face was a mask of blood, head wound. Scalp lacerations bleed like crazy but aren't always critical. Still, she had to check. Sarah dropped beside Patterson, her hands already moving. She wiped blood away, assessing. Deep laceration across the forehead, probably from flying metal. Bleeding heavily but not arterial, not immediately life-threatening. Patterson, can you hear me? Yeah, I hear you. You're cut but you're okay. I need to move to others. Can you hold this bandage on your head? I got it, Doc, go. Sarah pressed his hand over the pressure bandage. Triage. Always triage. Save the ones you can save in the order that maximizes survival. She looked back at Johnson, the amputee. He was unconscious now, but Patterson had maintained pressure, still alive. Hayes with the chest wound, Danny was monitoring him, still breathing. Rodriguez with the abdominal shrapnel, Danny was holding pressure, stable for now. Doc Williams, pale, tourniquet applied, watching her work with those gray eyes. Minute 8:12, the radio operator. Doc, WLAMS is down. Sarah's head whipped around. Not Doc Williams. The other Williams, Specialist Thomas Williams, their radio operator. No relation, but everyone called him Radio to avoid confusion. He was behind the third Humvee, his leg bent at an impossible angle. Femur fracture, probably. But there was blood, too much blood. The broken bone had severed his femoral artery. Sarah ran, sliding into cover beside him. Radio's face was gray, his lips blue, femoral artery. He had minutes, maybe seconds. Tourniquet, high and tight on the thigh. Her hands worked automatically, muscle memory taking over. Wind the tourniquet. Tighten. Keep tightening until the bleeding stops. Radio screamed. The sound cut through the gunfire, raw and primal. I know it hurts, stay with me. She got the tourniquet secured, then started an IV in his arm, combat gauze and fluids to combat shock. Her hands were steady despite the bullets cracking overhead. Radio, I need you to do something for me. What? His voice was weak. Call in our position to the QRF. We need backup. Can you do that? Radios, destroyed. He gestured weakly at the shattered equipment beside him. Then use mine. Sarah pulled her personal radio from her vest, pressed it into his hands. Channel 7, call it in. Give them our coordinates. You're our only link now. You understand, you're critical to the mission. Giving him a purpose, something to focus on besides pain and fear. Radio nodded, his hands closing around the device. Minute 13:18, the impossible run. Sarah heard it before she saw it, a wet choking sound, someone drowning in their own blood. Jackson, he'd been in her Humvee providing suppressing fire. Now he was on the ground clutching his throat, neck wound, arterial. This was the nightmare scenario. Neck wounds were almost impossible to treat in combat. Too many critical structures, too much blood flow, limited options for tourniquets. Sarah reached him in seconds. Blood poured between his fingers. His eyes were wide, terrified. I got you, Jackson, look at me, eyes on me. She packed the wound with hemostatic gauze, pressing hard. Jackson gagged, struggling. I know it's awful, but I need you to stay still. She wrapped a pressure bandage around his neck, tight enough to control bleeding but not so tight it cut off his airway. It was a delicate balance. Too loose and he'd bleed out. Too tight and he'd suffocate. Jackson's hand gripped her arm with desperate strength. You're okay, you're breathing, stay calm, slow breaths. The Taliban fire hadn't let up. If anything, it was intensifying. They were trying to finish the job. Minute 1924, back to the mentor. Martinez, Doc's voice weaker now, get over here. Sarah ran to him. His tourniquet was holding, but he'd been bleeding for 20 minutes. His skin was cold, clammy, classic shock. Doc, I need to. Listen to me. His voice was firm despite his condition. You're doing everything right, but you need to manage the scene. Hayes needs a chest decompression. His breathing's getting worse. Johnson needs more fluids or he'll crash. You've got maybe 10 minutes before the golden hour expires on your critical patients. Sarah's mind raced. The golden hour, the critical window for trauma survival. They were running out of time. What about you? I'm stable, handle them first, that's an order. Doc grabbed her arm. And Sarah, when those birds come, you coordinate the evacuation. You're in charge of medical now. You understand? The weight of it hit her. She was in charge. Every decision, every prioritization, every life saved or lost, it was on her now. I understand. Then go, work your magic, Martinez. Minute 25:30, the final push. Sarah moved like she'd never moved before. She was everywhere at once, a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Back to Hayes, needle decompression on the opposite side. Another hiss of trapped air releasing. His breathing improved immediately. To Johnson, second IV line, push fluids, check the tourniquet. Still unconscious but pulse stronger. To Rodriguez, verify Danny's pressure hold, adjust position to prevent shock. To radio, confirm he'd reached QRF, check his vitals, adjust his IV flow. To Patterson, head wound still controlled, talking coherent. To Jackson, neck wound holding, breathing maintained, terrified but alive. Back to Doc, add a second tourniquet above the first, start an IV, treat for shock. She was covered in blood, Johnson's, Hayes, Rodriguez's, Jackson's, Doc's, radios. Her uniform was soaked crimson. Her hands were sticky. Her aid bag was nearly empty. But they were alive, all of them still alive. And then she heard it, the most beautiful sound in the world. The thunder of Apache helicopter gunships. Minute 31:32, the cavalry arrives. The Apache came in low and fast, their 30 cannons erupting with devastating fire. The Taliban positions on the ridgelines exploded in fire and dust. The enemy fighters scattered, their ambush broken by American air power. Within seconds, the incoming fire decreased, then stopped. Radio crackled. Bravo Company, this is Dustoff 3-1. We have 4 birds inbound for medical evacuation. Mark your LZ with smoke. Captain Reynolds popped purple smoke. The medevac helicopters appeared on the horizon, Black Hawks with red crosses, the most beautiful sight Sarah had ever seen. Sarah stood, her legs shaking. She'd done it. They'd all survived. 12 soldiers, 7 wounded, 0 dead. She looked at her blood-soaked hands and started laughing. Hysterical, exhausted, triumphant laughter. Doc Williams watched her from the ground, a slight smile on his pale face. "That's my girl," he whispered. "That's my medic." The dust devils from the landing helicopters washed over them all, and Sarah Martinez, the rookie nobody had trusted, stood in the center of it all, having just saved 12 lives in the worst 32 minutes of her life. The storm was over. But the legend was just beginning. The first Black Hawk touched down in a storm of dust and rotor wash. Sarah shielded her face, her boots planted in dirt that was stained dark with blood, her soldiers' blood. The crew chief jumped out, a litter team right behind him. "Who's critical?" he shouted over the engine noise. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos with unexpected authority. "Johnson, traumatic amputation, severe blood loss, he goes first." Training had taken over completely. The terrified rookie was gone. In her place stood a combat medic who just orchestrated a miracle. The litter team moved to Johnson. Sarah supervised the transfer, checking his tourniquet one more time, ensuring his IV line stayed secure. His face was ghost white, but his pulse was there, weak but present. "Keep those fluids running," she shouted to the flight medic. "He's lost at least 3 units, move." They loaded Johnson. The Black Hawk lifted off within 90 seconds, banking hard toward the base hospital. Sarah was already moving to the next casualty. The evacuation symphony. The second helicopter landed before the first had fully cleared. Sarah had mentally prioritized all 7 casualties during those final minutes of the firefight. Now she executed that plan with precision. Hayes, chest wound, bilateral needle decompression. Handle him carefully, watch his airway. Corporal Hayes was conscious now, his eyes finding Sarah's as they loaded him. "Thanks, Doc," he wheezed. "Thank me by living, Hayes. Don't make me look bad." He managed a weak smile as they carried him away. Third bird down. Rodriguez and Williams radio, abdominal shrapnel and femoral bleed, both stable but priority. Danny Chen had stayed with Rodriguez the entire time, maintaining pressure, talking to him, keeping him conscious. As they loaded Rodriguez onto the helicopter, Danny looked at Sarah with something like awe. "Doc, that was, you were." "Help them load radio," Sarah said, her voice hoarse. "We're not done yet." Fourth helicopter. Jackson neck wound needs immediate surgical eval, and Doc Williams. "No," Doc's voice stopped her. He was sitting up against a rock, pale and weak but alert. "Patterson and Jackson go. I can wait for the next bird." "Doc, you've been bleeding for 40 minutes. And my tourniquet is holding." Patterson's head wound might have a skull fracture. Jackson needs surgery within the hour. They go, I wait. End of discussion, Martinez. Sarah wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She was making the same calculations he would make. Save the most critical first. Patterson, Jackson, let's move. As they loaded the casualties, Jackson grabbed Sarah's hand. His neck was bandaged, his voice barely a whisper. You saved us. Rest your voice, you're gonna be fine. The fourth helicopter lifted off. Suddenly, the battlefield was quieter. The wounded were gone. The Taliban had retreated. The Apache gunships circled overhead like guardian angels. Only 5 soldiers remained on the ground. Captain Reynolds, Danny Chen, Specialist Morrison from the turret, Doc Williams, and Sarah. The 5th helicopter landed. This one would take Doc. The collapse. Sarah walked Doc to the helicopter, supporting him despite being half his size. His face was gray, his breathing shallow. You did good, kid, he said as they reached the bird. Better than good, you were magnificent. I learned from the best. No, Doc gripped her shoulder with surprising strength. You were always capable of this. I just showed you what you already had inside. He paused. They're gonna put you in for a medal, Martinez. You earned it. Don't let anyone tell you different. I don't care about medals. I just care that everyone lived. That's why you deserve one, Doc smiled weakly. See you at the hospital, Sarah, and hey, stop calling yourself a rookie. Rookies don't do what you just did. They loaded him, and the 5th helicopter climbed into the Afghan sky. Sarah stood there watching it disappear, her aid bag hanging from one hand, her other hand still raised in a half-wave. And then her legs gave out. She collapsed against the bullet-riddled Humvee, sliding down until she sat in the dirt. Her whole body started shaking, violent tremors she couldn't control. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving behind pure exhaustion and delayed shock. Her hands, she stared at her hands. They were covered in blood, dried, crusted, brown-red blood that coated her fingers, her palms, under her nails. Johnson's blood, Hayes' blood, Rodriguez's, Jackson's, Radio's, Doc's. 7 different soldiers' blood mixed together on her hands. She'd saved them, all of them. 12 wounded, 0 dead. The magnitude of it hit her like a physical blow. She'd kept 12 soldiers alive in a perfect ambush, under sustained fire, against impossible odds, for 32 minutes that felt like 32 hours. Sarah started laughing, then crying, then both at once, hysterical, exhausted, triumphant sobs that shook her entire frame. The captain's words. Boots appeared in her vision. Sarah looked up to see Captain Reynolds standing over her. His left arm was bandaged. She hadn't even known he'd been hit. When had that happened? The whole firefight was a blur of blood and screaming and movement. Reynolds slid down the Humvee to sit beside her in the dirt. For a long moment he said nothing. They just sat there together, 2 soldiers covered in blood and dust, surrounded by the wreckage of the ambush. I froze, Sarah finally said. When I first saw Doc bleeding, I froze for a second. I saw, maybe 2 seconds. Then you ran toward Johnson under heavy fire. That wasn't freezing, Martinez. That was assessing. 7 casualties. I couldn't be everywhere at once. I had to choose who to treat first, who could wait. What if I chose wrong? Reynolds looked at her with an expression she'd never seen from him before. Respect. Pure, unfiltered respect. Martinez, I've been in combat for 12 years, 3 deployments. I've seen a lot of medics work. Some good, some great, some who cracked under pressure. He paused. What you just did, I've never seen anything like it. You were everywhere. You were calm. You made the right calls every single time. 7 critical casualties in a sustained firefight, and you saved every single one. Sarah's voice cracked. I used almost everything in my aid bag. If there'd been an 8th casualty. There wasn't, and you know why. Because you worked so fast, so efficiently that the Taliban couldn't capitalize. You stabilized soldiers faster than they could shoot them. Reynolds shook his head in disbelief. I'm putting you in for the Silver Star. Combat valor, heroism under fire. You earned it 100 times over. I was just doing my job. No, your job was to provide medical support. What you did was superhuman. You were a one-woman hospital in the middle of hell. He stood, offering her his hand. Come on. Evac Bird's coming back for us in 10 minutes. Let's get you home. Sarah took his hand and stood on shaking legs. She looked around at the battlefield one last time. The burned Humvees, the blood-soaked dirt, the bullet casings glinting in the afternoon sun. This was where the rookie had died. This was where the legend had been born. Danny Chen appeared at her side, his young face still pale with shock. Doc, I mean Sarah, I just want to say, he struggled for words. My daughter's gonna grow up with a dad because of you. Thank you doesn't even begin to cover it. Sarah pulled him into a hug, not caring about the blood, the dirt, the tears. We take care of each other, she whispered. That's how we survive. The final helicopter appeared on the horizon, coming to take them home. Sarah Martinez, no longer a rookie, no longer doubted, no longer the outsider, stood tall as it landed. She'd walked into that mountain pass as a medic, still trying to prove herself. She'd walked out as a hero, the helicopter ride back to base passed in a blur. Sarah sat strapped into the jump seat, staring at nothing, her blood-soaked uniform stiff and uncomfortable. The crew chief tried to give her water. She couldn't make her hands work to hold the bottle. Captain Reynolds sat across from her, watching with concern. Danny Chen was beside her, quiet for once. The rhythmic thump of the rotors filled the silence, a sound that would forever remind Sarah of this day. When they landed, the entire base had turned out. Word had spread fast. 12 wounded, 0 dead, 1 medic, an impossible save. As Sarah climbed out of the helicopter, her legs nearly buckled. A medical officer rushed forward, trying to check her for injuries. I'm fine, she said automatically. Ma'am, you're covered in blood. None of it's mine. Her voice sounded hollow, distant. I need to check on my patients. Where are they? The hospital, but ma'am, you need to. Sarah was already walking, moving on autopilot toward the base hospital. Her legs carried her through a gauntlet of staring soldiers. Some saluted, some just watched in silence. She barely registered any of it. The hospital was chaos. She found Johnson first, in surgery, stable. Hayes in recovery, chest tubes in place, breathing on his own. Rodriguez awaiting surgery, conscious and asking for her. Radio Williams with his shattered leg in traction, already joking with the nurses. Jackson in ICU, neck wound being monitored but talking. Patterson with a dozen stitches and a mild concussion. Doc Williams was in a recovery room, IV fluids running, color returning to his face. He saw her standing in the doorway and smiled. There she is, the hero of the hour. Sarah walked to his bedside. How bad? Through and through, missed the artery by 2 centimeters. Lucky. He gestured at the chair. Sit down before you fall down, Martinez. She sat. The adrenaline was completely gone now, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion that made her feel like she weighed 1,000 pounds. I keep running through it, Sarah said quietly, wondering if I made the right calls, if I could have moved faster, if... Stop, Doc's voice was firm but gentle. You made all the right calls, every single one. I watched you work, Sarah. Even bleeding out, I was watching, and you were perfect. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks, cutting tracks through the dried blood on her face. I was so scared. I know, that's what makes it brave. 3 weeks later. The award ceremony was held on a crisp November morning. The entire company stood in formation. Visiting brass from Bagram had flown in. Even a 2-star general was present. Sarah stood at attention in her dress uniform, feeling like an imposter. The Silver Star hung heavy in its presentation box, one of the military's highest decorations for combat valor. The citation was read aloud. For gallantry in action against an enemy of the United States, Private First Class Sarah Martinez distinguished herself by exceptionally valorous conduct. Under intense enemy fire, treated 7 critically wounded soldiers, calm under fire, saved 12 lives. Actions reflect great credit upon herself, her unit, and the United States Army. The general pinned the star to her chest. Cameras flashed. People applauded. Sarah looked out at the formation and saw them. Johnson, back from Germany, learning to use his prosthetic. Hayes, chest scars hidden under his uniform, grinning. Rodriguez, Danny, Radio, Jackson, Patterson, all alive, all present. Doc Williams stood to the side, leaning on a cane, his eyes wet with proud tears. That was worth more than any medal. The ripple effect. The story spread beyond Forward Operating Base Tillman, beyond Afghanistan. It traveled through military channels, social media, news outlets. Rookie medic saves 12 in heroic stand, read the headlines. Young women considering military service saw themselves in Sarah's story. Medical students in training learned about her actions in their tactical combat casualty care courses. She became a case study in triage, in staying calm under pressure, in doing the impossible. But Sarah never thought of herself as special. She was just a medic who'd done her job. Still, things changed. When she walked through the base, soldiers she'd never met saluted with genuine respect. New medics asked her for advice. Commanders requested her for missions. The rookie nobody trusted had become the medic everyone wanted. 4 years later, Dr. Sarah Martinez walked through the emergency department of Memorial Hermann Hospital in Houston, Texas. Her white coat was clean, a far cry from the blood-soaked uniforms of Afghanistan. Her stethoscope hung around her neck. Her name badge read, Sarah Martinez, M.D., Emergency Medicine. The ER was chaos. Saturday night in a Level 1 trauma center. A car accident with multiple casualties had just arrived, 5 patients, all critical. Sarah's mind shifted into combat mode automatically. Trauma Bay 1, the hypotensive driver. Bay 2, the kid with the head injury. Bay 3, chest trauma, move. She ran the trauma like she'd run that mountain pass. Calm, decisive, everywhere at once, prioritizing, stabilizing, saving. When the dust settled 2 hours later, all 5 patients were stable, heading to surgery or ICU. Her attending physician, Dr. Chen, no relation to Danny, pulled her aside. Martinez, that was textbook trauma management, where'd you learn to stay that calm? Sarah thought about a mountain pass in Afghanistan, about bullets and blood and impossible choices. The Army, she said simply. The return. Once a year, Sarah traveled to Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio to speak to new Army medics in their final week of training. They sat in the same classrooms where she'd once sat, fresh-faced and nervous. She stood before them in civilian clothes, the silver star in a shadow box under her arm. I froze during my first real casualty, she told them. For about 5 seconds I couldn't move. I was terrified, and that's okay. Fear is normal. The young medics, some barely 19, listened intently. What matters is what you do next. Do you stay frozen or do you push through? Do you give up or do you fight for every single life? Sarah paused. You're going to doubt yourselves. You're going to be scared. You're going to face situations where you think you can't handle it, but you can. I promise you, you can. She told them about Morrison, about Miller, about that day in the mountain pass, about Doc Williams and Captain Reynolds and 12 soldiers who lived because one rookie medic refused to quit. After her speech, the young medics lined up to meet her. They shook her hand, asked questions, took photos, looked at her with the same hope and fear she'd once felt. One young woman, maybe 22, asked quietly, "What if I'm not good enough?" Sarah looked at her and saw herself 8 years ago, uncertain, doubting, afraid. "You are good enough," Sarah said. "You just don't know it yet, but you will. When the moment comes, you'll be ready. Trust your training, trust yourself, and know that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. The legacy. Years passed. Sarah became one of Houston's top trauma surgeons. She married, had 2 kids, lived a normal civilian life. But that day in Afghanistan never left her. Sometimes in the middle of a complex trauma, when 5 critical patients arrived simultaneously and chaos reigned, she heard Doc Williams' voice. Your brain is your most important tool. Think, prioritize, act. Sometimes, when a young resident froze during their first real emergency, she pulled them aside afterward and told them it was okay. Everyone freezes. What matters is what comes next. She kept in touch with Bravo Company. Holiday cards from Danny Chen and photos of Isabella, now a teenager. Messages from Hayes, Rodriguez, Jackson. A yearly phone call with Doc Williams, now retired and teaching at a medical college. Johnson sent her a video once. Him running a 5K on his prosthetic leg, finishing strong, tears streaming down his face. The message read, I'm running because you gave me the chance to. Thank you for my life, Doc. The truth she carried. Late at night, when her family slept and the house was quiet, Sarah sometimes took out her silver star and looked at it. She remembered every detail of those 32 minutes. The fear, the blood, the impossible choices. She remembered being the rookie nobody trusted. And she smiled, because that rookie had taught her the most important lesson of her life. Ordinary people can do extraordinary things when everything depends on it. She was just a medic who'd done her job. She was just a person who'd pushed through fear. She was just someone who'd refused to quit. And that, more than any medal, any recognition, any legend, was enough. Sarah Martinez had entered that mountain pass as a rookie. She'd walked out as a hero. But most importantly, she'd learned that heroism isn't about being fearless. It's about caring more about others than you fear for yourself. It's about doing what must be done, one patient at a time. And that lesson saved lives every single day. The end.